everyone. Thanks for joining us. Welcome to the SYA Admissions with SYA Alums Google Hangout. My name is Kate Martell. I'm the Admissions Marketing Manager here at SYA. And joining me tonight, I have two SYA alums. Would you like to introduce yourselves?
My name is Matt Levinson. I am Assistant Director of Admissions at School Year Abroad and alum of SYA Spain.
Hello, my name is Anna. I'm also an Assistant Director of Admissions at SYA, and I'm a proud Spain 0506 alum.
Great, thanks guys. So tonight we're going to talk a little bit about SYA in general for those of you who maybe are just hearing about us for the first time. And then we're going to do some Q&A with our two Spain alums. They're going to answer some of the most frequently asked questions, and then we'll have a chance for you all at the end to ask your questions. We already do have a bunch of them submitted, so we'll be addressing those at the end. And some of them will be addressed during the conversation, but if you have questions that we don't address, please put them in the chat box and we'll do our best at the end. So Anna, do you want to give just a brief overview of SYA for those people who are learning about SYA for the first time?
Sure. So SYA is a year-long homestay and study abroad program for high school juniors and seniors. What makes SYA really unique is that you can go abroad as a junior or senior and not lose a year of high school. Each year we accept 60 students at each of our centers in Italy, Spain, France, and China. This year we accepted 237 students from 140 unique different high schools. And just a couple things about our schools. For France and Spain, there is a 2-year language requirement, and that's because our teachers instruct exclusively in French and Spanish, with exception to math and English. But with SYA Italy and China, you can come as a beginner or you can come as at a more advanced level. So if you are interested in SYA but don't necessarily have a language background, Italy and China are for you.
Great. Thanks, Anna. So if you guys want to talk a little bit about, we'll go back and forth, how you heard about SYA. If you want to talk about, just mention where you came from, the schools that you came from, and why you decided to apply. Matt, do you want to go first?
Sure. So I heard about SYA Spain when I was a sophomore in high school. I heard about it in my level 3 Spanish class that I was in. And I actually had a representative who was what I'm doing now. They came into my classroom to talk about the program. They talked about what SYA was, what they did, where it was located, and I just remember feeling incredibly excited and really wanting to know more. And so I went home that same day and I actually did some more research on SYA. Thought it was not only something that was incredibly exciting and new and unique and this incredible opportunity, but also something that I could qualify for. So I ended up talking to my parents, and after a little bit of convincing, they allowed me to apply the program, and I got in, and the rest is history.
Yeah, great. And I just want to mention that for those of you who haven't talked to your parents yet who are watching, please share this link with your parents. We're having a parent hangout on January 12th, and check out our blog because we also have some tips on how to start that conversation with your parents. And I just want to mention, Matt, you came from a public school in the Mass?
I did. So we have a pretty diverse group of students who tend to apply to SYA. We have basically 3 different sort of sections of students, I guess you could say. I went to a public school here in Massachusetts. We also had students who went to independent day schools, and we also had a large number of students who also went to boarding schools in the United States. So, but they came coast to coast from all over the place. It was a really interesting mix when I got there. I had only ever gone to school with other students who grew up in my hometown, so it was quite a different experience to be going to school in Spain with students from all over the country.
Great, thanks. How about you, Anna? How did you hear about SYA?
So I went to a small independent school in Rhode Island, but I actually did not hear about SYA through my school. My uncle actually did what was School Boys Abroad in the 1960s, and then my 2 cousins, his daughters, did SYA France. So I always knew about SYA, but kind of abstractly, and so I didn't know if I was going to apply my sophomore year, but then I went on a trip to Costa Rica, and even though I was there for just 10 days, it really had a profound impact on me in terms of how little I knew Spanish, even though I had been studying it for the last 5 years, and just how little I knew of the world outside Attleboro, Massachusetts. So I figured when I got home that I was going to submit the application that night. And as Matt said, the rest is history. So
Great. Thanks, you guys. So the largest component of School Year Abroad is we are a school. We have 4 different schools in China, France, Italy, and Spain. So do you guys want to talk about what your favorite class was and why, and how it was different from your homeschool?
Sure. So my favorite class was a class that actually it's slightly altered form, but the class still exists at SYA Spain. When I went, it was called Mediterranean Art History. It was the first art history course that I ever taken, and it was taught by an incredible instructor. I mean, the staff at SYA were, I mean, phenomenal. They were some of the best teachers I've had before or since. And what was great about the class was not only were we studying things that I had never studied before, but we were able to make these connections both inside and outside of class. We would study things in my Mediterranean art class that had to do with what we're studying in my Spanish history class, or what we're studying in my Spanish cinema or theater class. And we were also able to really be able to connect with those things up close in a really personal way. We were able to study, for example, the what's called Mudéjar architecture, which is something that we actually focused on during our trip to the south of Spain during the spring break. So it was this, we were able to see these things in our textbook, we were able to study them, we were able to get a really great idea of placing them in the historical context, and then actually see them up close. And it was really amazing.
Great, thanks.
my favorite class was Cine, or Spanish cinema. For me, it was just a unique way of studying history because it was a history class, but it wasn't the traditional textbook setting. So we were using film to study Spanish history. So we started with silent cinema up until modern cinema. And it was just an interesting reflection on the political landscape in Spain, especially during the Franco era. And so it actually, I didn't know that I really was a fan of Spanish cinema, obviously, because it was a class that wasn't even conceivable at my home school. So it was something that even when I went to college, something that I was really interested in, and grateful that I was able to take that class.
Cool. So what about when you're not in school, extracurriculars? Do you also, one of you want to talk for 10 seconds about our extracurricular coordinator at each of our schools, explain how that works?
Sure. So we have at SYA, regardless of SYA Spain, SYA France, Italy, or China, we have an extracurriculars coordinator who is responsible for helping students either continue with an extracurricular, that they're doing now, or to find something completely new that they would like to continue with while over there, or let's start with while they're over there. So we have students who maybe are athletes and want to continue playing soccer or basketball, or they want to swim, or we have students who are really interested in theater or playing a musical instrument, or are involved in Mali Wen, or they want to do, maybe they want to do something completely different. Maybe they want to, if they're in China, they want to try Tai Chi or martial arts, something maybe they've never tried before. And we help them find those places in the community where they're able to not only get acquainted with whatever particular extracurricular they're going for, but really be able to mingle with other 15, 16, 17-year-old local students their age. And that's one of the best ways to actually make local friends, is through the extracurriculars. So I did tennis, and I also did Brazilian martial arts called capoeira while I was in Spain. Tennis was something I continued, and capoeira was something completely new that I just wanted to try, and it ended up being a blast.
I think that's pretty popular in Spain.
Yeah, now it is.
What about you, Anna?
So I took cooking classes. If you know me, you know that food is a very important part of my life. And so when I knew that there was opportunities to cook with a local Spaniard, I definitely did that. I don't know, coming back to the States and trying to do a paella or gazpacho has been difficult, but it was really great to learn those classic recipes. And then also get to interact with my SYA friends in a different context too. And then I did something called an intercambio, which was essentially, it was kind of a tutoring session. So I would meet with a local Spaniard and we would speak for like an hour in Spanish, and then we would do an hour in English. So it was kind of a smaller setting in order to practice my Spanish, but also get to know local Spaniards as well.
And if you guys want to check out our blog, we have profiles of a student who's currently in France who is dancing, and another student who is continuing her passion of golf abroad. So be sure to check those out. All kinds of stuff that our kids are doing this year. So when you're not in school, when you're not doing any kind of extracurricular, you're probably hanging out with your host family. So do you guys want to talk a little bit about what your host family experience was like?
Sure. So my host family was wonderful. And host families, it's important to note that they run the gamut. So I had a host family. They were what you might call empty nesters. They had grown students who had moved out of the house. They lived right down the street, or excuse me, grown children that lived right down the street. But they were wonderful. I've gone back to Spain to visit my host family on a number of different occasions. I really formed a strong connection with them. And the host families are great, not only because they provide, the love and care the family that your family in the United States does, but they also give you a really nuanced understanding of the language and the culture that you don't get in a language class. They help you understand, what makes Spaniards or Chinese or Italians or French people, what makes them tick, what's important to them, what kind of food do they eat, what do they do on their Sunday afternoon, what kind of activities are they involved in, what's important to them. I mean, there's all these kinds of things that are really sort of interesting that I never considered before I lived with this family. And I really did form a great connection with them. And they were probably, I'd say they were one of the best parts of SYA was my host family.
Yeah. What about you, Anna?
So I lived with a single mother and her son. He was a couple years younger than me, and they were the absolute best. They were the family. I needed them because originally when you first get there, I was definitely a shy 16-year-old, and they kind of drew me out of my shell slowly but surely. And they were just what I needed when I got there. They were supportive. They were very loving. They had endless patience. And my host brother, like Matt said, he made my experience. He was my best friend when I was there. And he was also really doting. He would come in and check on me to make sure that I was doing my homework, and he would come into my bedroom with snacks. And he'd go for runs, and he'd play basketball. And he was the absolute best. So I was really grateful for having been placed with them.
Yeah, that's sweet. They kind of take you under their wing.
Yes, they do.
So I just want to, I know that we're taking questions at the end, but while we're on the topic of host families, Stephen's question, is there anywhere in the application where we can request host brothers and sisters and request that they are my age? So that's sort of at the end of the process. Once students are accepted, they will fill out a variety of forms, and one of them talks about the host family placement, the type of family that you come from, the type of family that you're interested in living in. So all of those questions are asked of you. And then Matt, maybe do you want to talk about the host family coordinators at each of our schools?
Sure. So at each of our schools, we have a host family placement coordinator. They're responsible for finding the host families, for vetting the host families, and for actually, once a student, like Kate says, acceptance to the program, they're actually responsible for placing each individual student with each individual family. So it is a process, so to speak. There's a lot that goes into it. There's input from students when they're accepted into the program. What kind of family do you want to live with? Are you religiously observant? Do you have dietary restrictions? How many siblings would you like to have? And we're working with families that are already formed, so we're not going to create the ideal 100% family. But the idea being that we try and place you with a family that you'll be comfortable with, and that you will get the most out of your experience with. And fortunately, a lot of our host families, actually a majority of our host families in any given year, have hosted an SYA student before. And so, which is great. A lot of them have experience working with SYA students. I was with a brand new host family. They had never hosted an American student before, and they were wonderful. But it's also something that's sort of nice if they know a little bit about American culture before you walk in the door.
Yeah. So Stephen, I hope that answers your question. There is a whole process, and trust that that is something that you'll be able to talk about as students are accepted. So moving on to a new topic of winter break. So our schools are currently on winter break, and they all just kind of had little celebrations at each of their schools. What did you, how did you spend your winter breaks?
Sure. So I spent my winter break. I actually a lot of our American families. So my family from the United States actually came over and visited me, which was wonderful. That happens for a lot of students. Some students, you know, they either stay with their host family or they spend time with the friends that they've made in the program. I actually, so during winter break, I had my host family, my American family, and I all, you know, have Christmas lunch together. And then we actually, me and my parents actually did a week-long trip to the south of Spain, which was great because at that point I had already been to the south of Spain with SYA. I already was like pretty good at Spanish, so I was like their tour guide during the whole thing. I was like showing them around and, you know, and ordering food for them and translating menus and street signs and talking with people and being at 16 years old this translator for this entire group of people, which was pretty amazing.
Yeah, that's awesome.
So my parents came to visit as well. So we spent a couple days in Zaragoza, and so my biological parents met my host family, and we had dinner together. And what was neat about that is that there was like an instantaneous bond between my host family and my biological family, even though they couldn't communicate at all, and I was a translator. But you know, just having me as the common thread there, it was like a love fest. So it was really nice. And then we went to Alicante and Barcelona, and yeah, it was really amazing. My parents knew that when I was translating for them in the cab, they like kind of knew that I hit my stride and had a newfound confidence. So it was a lot of fun, and we went with another SYA family, and my friend from SYA, his stepsister was actually a girl I went to high school with, but we didn't really know that.
Oh, wow.
So it was really fun.
SYA connections everywhere. Great. So you mentioned, Matt, that you had gone to the South already.
Yep.
What kind of trips did you guys go on, and what was your favorite one?
We did a lot of trips. In every country, typically students, as part of the school, so as part of the curriculum, typically students do anywhere from between 3 to 5 weeks of travel. And so those could be small day trips. So, for example, students in SY Italy might go to Rome for the day, or students in Beijing might visit the Forbidden City. And then you also do the trips that are farther afield. So in Spain, like I mentioned, we might go to the south of Spain. In France, we'll go to the Loire Valley. In China, we might go to the Yunnan province. So there's all these different kinds of trips that we do. There really are a lot of amazing memories from those trips. One of my favorite was of a town called Guernica, which is not far from Zaragoza. It's actually the subject of a very, very famous Picasso painting, which we studied in my Mediterranean art history class. And it was a city that was devastated by the Spanish Civil War, and it has not been reconstructed nor re-inhabited. It remains as a remnant of the Civil War. And it was a very powerful way to learn not only about Spanish history and Spanish art, but get a deeper sense of the Spanish people and the Spanish identity.
Interesting.
So my favorite trip was to a small town called Cadaqués, and it's the birthplace of Dali. So it was a whole big trip. We started in Zaragoza, and then we made our way to Barcelona, and then to Cadaqués. So for me, it was just really cool to see this new province, and also we had studied Dali in our history, so to see the subject of many of his paintings was great, and it was the first time that I went into the Mediterranean Sea too. But on our way back, we stopped at this restaurant, and we had something called calçots, which are basically leeks. But they brought this huge plate out of calçots, and nobody knew how to eat them, and we all had bibs, and we're like, do we eat them with a fork and knife? And so finally we kind of just dig in, and we all kind of look foolish, and we have romesco sauce all over ourselves. But for me, it was, this is a country at this point, this was in April when we went, that I thought I knew so well, the cuisine. And then to find something new even in April was kind of, it was continual teachable moments. So
that's awesome. And how were they? Were they tasty?
They were very tasty.
Cow sauce are
Yeah.
fantastic. They're amazing.
Great. Eat your veggies.
Yeah.
So you've mentioned, you've talked about a lot of topics. Why, other than the fact that you now get to work at SYA, why are you glad that you went?
Well, the obvious reason to, attend SYA, I mean, in the most utilitarian sense possible, is that it allows you to become either highly proficient or fluent in the language, which is certainly the case. I consider myself fluent in Spanish as the result of my time spent at SYA. That's great. It was amazing. It's not something that I'm ever going to forget. But beyond that, I think I also am really glad I spent my time at SYA because it gave me a much richer, deeper understanding of the world around me. Up until that point in my life, I had been on vacation before, but I'd never lived anywhere else besides my small town where I grew up. I'd never really understood how someone, half a world away would live. And it was incredible to understand that and to gain a deeper perspective. And then in addition, I also made some incredible friends in a school that's anywhere from, this year in Spain, we have 70 students. It's not a big school. In China, we would have 45. These are small schools, and you become very, very close with the other people in the program. They become some of your best friends. And so I still have some friendships that I cherish to this day from SYA. Yeah, and also just having a deeper appreciation of cultural differences and cultural understanding, I'd say as well.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, I think that also there's this new side of you that you discover. For me, not only was it someone that can now speak fluent Spanish, but also this confidence that developed, and just as somebody that also had a new home, and that understood a new culture. So I think for me, it was just finding out new sides of myself, which was very gratifying, and I think gratifying for everybody that knew the new me going back. So
yeah. Great. I just want to remind everybody that if you have questions for us, be sure to put them in the chat box, and we will do our best to get to those in a few minutes. Matt, you mentioned being fluent. Was there a moment where the light bulb kind of went off and you were like, oh my gosh, I'm fluent? Because we do have a couple, just as a segue, a couple of questions. How hard was it to learn the language spoken fluently? So was there a moment? And maybe if you want to talk a little bit about how there's the learning in the classroom, but that's different from learning from your host family and learning, we talked with an SYA summer alum earlier today who said she was asked directions and she was able to tell a local when the bus was coming, and that was her moment of, oh, I'm living here now, I'm doing this.
I think, yeah, typically one of the reasons that the program is 9 months long, that it runs the academic year, is that it typically takes that amount of time for a student to either become highly proficient or fluent. So I definitely realized that I was fluent second semester. It had been coming in fits and starts for a long time, but there was a point in time where I was sitting with my host family at the dinner table, and we were talking. I can't even remember what we were talking about, but there was this moment where I remember I wasn't thinking, how do I say this in Spanish? I wasn't even there, because there's this process. Here's the thought in English, and then how do I say this in Spanish? And then it comes out in Spanish. And it was literally, I had this thought, but it was a thought in Spanish, and it came out as a phrase in Spanish. There was no English part of that, and that was the moment where I realized that I was speaking like a Spaniard, which was pretty gratifying, especially when I traveled to other parts of Spain. And for those of you who have not been to Spain, I don't look particularly Spanish, and people would ask me, they would get really confused because I'd be speaking like a Spaniard, and they'd ask, where are you from? And I'd say, Los Estados Unidos, you know, the United States. And they'd say, oh, really? Okay. But they were like genuinely confused.
You're passable, yeah.
Yeah.
Was there a moment for you, Anna?
Yes, so I took a theater class, and we have 2 productions, one in December and one in spring. And so the one in December, I was petrified because I had this long monologue, and I got to a point in the monologue where I completely forgot my lines. And so I started to do a little improv, and people laughed, and so I was like, I was doing something
You're
right.
killing it.
So I think that was the moment.
Nice. Improvisation is a good skill to be able to have. So before we get to some questions, do you have a piece of advice for someone who's considering SYA?
A piece of advice for someone considering SYA.
It could be a few pieces.
Sure. I mean, working in the admissions department, if this is something that you really want to do, I advise you to be honest and to really don't tell us what we want to hear. Tell us why you want to go, why you want to learn that language. I think that's really important, and to also, you know, dream big. I mean, that's how I was able to do SYA. I was able to dream beyond the walls of my high school. I was able to dream for something bigger, and I think that was wonderful, and it helped me land where I am now, not only at SYA, but also going through the rest of high school, the rest of college. I mean, SYA influenced a lot of what I did, not only where I went to school, but what I ended up studying. So I'd say dream big.
Nice.
I figure if you are watching the Google Hangout, you're pretty serious already. And I think the hardest part is deciding whether or not to apply. And I would say don't second guess that. And once you're there and once you've decided to go, make the most of it immediately, because it passes so quickly.
Very quickly.
And I wish that it didn't take me, I think it took me until December to really feel confident. And I am envious of the people that it only took a couple weeks. So just make the most of it.
Yeah, we've talked about earlier, even with the language, not being afraid to kind of make a mistake or say something silly or maybe make a fool of yourself, but to just kind of go for it and dive in. So if we haven't addressed any of your questions, please put them in the chat box. I'm going to start going through some of those now. But let's see, what else haven't we answered so far? So Isaac asked, do you feel if your academics and non-humanities such as math and science depreciated while you were away from your schools? Do you want to talk about math and science classes at SYA?
Sure. When I did SYA, we hadn't introduced some of the classes that we have now at SYA, but I felt that I didn't take a science class at SYA. I ended up taking 2 honors level science classes my senior year of high school, honors level chemistry and honors level physics. And it was, I didn't feel like I had depreciated in any demonstrable way. I really felt like when I returned to the United States, although I was a completely different person, academically speaking, I was a little bit further ahead than my peers because I really stepped outside of my comfort zone. Math, on the other hand, I had a wonderful, I took honors level pre-calculus at SYA. I had a great math teacher, and I ended up, when I returned to high school, I ended up taking an AB calculus course and doing quite well on that, and taking the AB calculus exam and scoring quite well on it.
Now I feel like you're bragging.
A little bit. So it was, that was something I don't feel like really deteriorated as a result of my experience at SYA, but that's my personal experience.
And just on a side note, I personally was a weak science and math student. But when I got back, I only had to take AP biology when I got back senior year. And I think for me, the hardest thing was gaining fluency in my life still. And so that skill of learning another language kind of translated to other classes. And so I think in a way, my study habits had changed so much because of SYA that science and math were a bit easier when I got back.
And we do have English and math teachers who teach in English for both of those classes. And some of those teachers come from independent schools from the United States, many of whom are from our member schools. So we do have, while our faculty abroad that teach in the language and teach Chinese history and Italian, global issues, global studies, our Italians and Chinese and French and Spanish, our English and math teachers are from U.S. high schools. Danielle and someone else asked something kind of similar. What were some of the skills that you learned at SYA that have helped you later in life?
Sure. Well, I think one of the just in terms of hard skills was fluency on a language, and also ability to adapt and to feel comfortable in another culture and another setting, which I found was really important going on to the undergraduate level. But just in terms of sort of the character building exercise, which SYA in a really big sense is a character building exercise, I became a lot more confident. I became a lot more willing to try new things and really step outside of my comfort zone, because I'd made this pretty big leap outside of my comfort zone, and I'd ended up a lot better for it. So that was something else that I learned. And just in terms of taking every opportunity that came to me, that was also a really important skill I learned at SYA, because my SYA teachers and the SYA program offered me so many opportunities to take so many different options, even when I was already in Spain, that I was able to really get a lot, even more out of it than maybe some of my classmates, because I was willing to take those risks and willing to take those opportunities.
Cool.
It's a really good question. I think essentially everything that said, but also problem solving too, because I think that not everything is quite so clear cut when you get there, and just also self-reliance is, you have to rely on yourself a lot throughout this year, and the friendships that you make and the network that you have there. And I also think you have to ask for help when you need it. Like I said, the first couple of months were difficult for me, so I would go to the resident director for tutoring, and I would ask for that, because I knew that I didn't want this opportunity to slip away. So it was very important for me to kind of observe that my Spanish wasn't where it should be, and asking for that help.
Yeah, and you do have that sense of self-reliance, but you also do have a good support system between the resident director, the faculty, your host family, each other. You're all going through that same sort of experience together, and that's a bonding factor. Are you still in contact with your host families, and have you gone back to your host countries since you've graduated?
Yes and yes. So I've been back to Spain several times since I completed my program of study at SYA. During college, I returned to Spain to study abroad. I enrolled directly at the University of Barcelona because I wanted to continue with Spanish. I wanted to return to Spain because it's a country that I fell in love with. And I also wanted to be able to learn one of the regional languages in Spain, which is called Catalan, which I was able to do. So that was a great opportunity. I made a point of going back and visiting my host family, and that was great, because I was like, it was like I was 16 again, and I was living with my host family. I saw my host mom, my host dad, my host brothers and sisters and nephews and nieces, and it was a great experience. And just feeling like I had returned home when I got back to Zaragoza, it was great.
Nice. Have you been back, Anna?
Yes, so I studied abroad in Barcelona as well, and that's when I visited my host family. And it was, it was kind of funny, because the first time I met my host family, Lorenzo, my host brother, and I were playing darts. And so when I visited 5 years later, he goes, "Do you want to play darts?" And so it was literally deja vu. And so after I studied abroad in college, I went back to teach for a year and a half in Spain.
Mhm.
So I and still have a great love for Spain.
Nice. We have a couple of questions kind of about the application process.
Mhm.
Elise asked about applicants and merit scholarships. Do one of you want to talk about sort of the application, the merit scholarship, the Halsey scholarship, financial aid, and how those are kind of separate?
Sure.
entities?
So as you guys know who have started the application, there's a bunch of different pieces to the application, teacher recommendations, essays, transcripts. And then in addition, we also have two different scholarships. Scholarships, the merit scholarship is, as its name suggests, a scholarship based entirely on a student's merit. Students who have demonstrated academic ability, who are doing really well in their language class, who get great recommendations, may be considered for the merit scholarship. In order to qualify for the merit scholarship, you need to submit an additional recommendation and an additional essay. And we award 4 merit scholars in every country. So 16 in total. The merit scholarship itself is worth $20,000. And it goes, again, like I said, it goes to 4 students in every country. And then we also have the Halsey Scholarship, which is a scholarship which is given to 1 student every year who has not only exceptional academic ability, but also demonstrated financial need. In other words, if we're not for the Halsey Scholarship, which is a full ride scholarship, they would not be able to do SYA. So the Halsey Scholarship tends to go to a student who is very, very academically gifted. And there's a lot of thought put into the winner of the Merit Scholarship and the Halsey Scholarship. And then we also have financial aid. So financial aid is not based on a student's academic ability. If a student is accepted into SYA and they have also submitted a financial aid application, they may receive financial aid, which just means that if you're good enough to get into the program, we try to meet your financial needs to make the program a possibility. Every year, we have more students who apply for financial aid than we are able to meet the need of, unfortunately. But we are able to give that financial aid to the majority of students accepted in the program who ask for it, which is quite wonderful.
So Elise, I hope that answers your question. So yes, you can be accepted into the program, but may not receive the merit scholarship. Those
Yep.
are 4 per country. And the same with the Halsey. And I just want to note, you can apply for the merit and the Halsey and financial aid.
That is correct.
You can apply for all of those. And there was one more thing I wanted to say, but I said, oh, and the other distinction I want to make about our financial aid is that it is a grant. It is not a loan.
Right. No,
So-
no, there's no loans.
No.
It is a
So
grant
that's
from
different.
SYA.
Right. It's different from what you might have heard about college or something like that. It's not. Okay. Let me see. If you have any more questions, please let us know. It looks like we might have answered them all. So do you want to just give a shout out about how to apply, deadlines?
Yep. So the application deadline, as you guys may know, so is coming up after the holiday break. For students who are interested in applying for the merit, remember that's the goes to 4 students to each country, or the Halsey Scholarship, that's the 1 student who is a full ride scholarship. Those applications, the entire application is going to be due February 1st.
Mm-hmm.
Now, for those students who are not applying for scholarships, regardless of whether or not they're applying for financial aid. So the financial aid deadline and the standard application deadline is February 15th. And so you may ask, well, when I submit the application, when will I hear back? That's a great question. You will hear back from us by mid-March. Typically when we send out the admissions acceptances, and you will either receive a letter in the mail or an email or both, letting you know of our admissions decision.
Thanks, Matt. There's one more question. How do I set up a personal interview from Emma? Those interviews are set up once you submit your application. So once you submit, you will receive information for a SYA alum who is going to conduct your interview, and you'll receive their information. You can reach out to them and schedule that either in person or Skype chat. Sometimes students meet at a coffee shop, but definitely when you have that interview, make sure your personality shines through. Don't be nervous. If you need tips, check out our YouTube, School Year Abroad. We have Carly, our assistant marketing manager, put together a video on 5 tips on completing your SYA application. So check that out. Let's see, we have a couple more questions coming in. Standardized tests, that's a
Great
good
question.
one. And language placement tests and the difference between the 4 placement levels. I'm not sure exactly how many placement levels are at each of our schools, but do you guys want to talk first about SATs, PSATs, ACTs, that type of thing?
Sure.
I can hit on the prep. So we are a registered test site, so you can take the APs, SATs, and the ACTs in most cases at our schools. And we also offer SAT prep. There's a free version, and then there is a program that is an additional cost, and it's 2 intensive weekends. So you are probably very excited about that, but you will be able to take your SATs at SYA.
Yeah. So we're a registered test site, and the students take the tests typically on the same dates that do in the United States. It's the same test. The question I get asked a lot, is it in the language? No, it is in English. It is the same exact test that you receive in the United States. So don't worry about that. We have test prep. We have a college counselor on site who helps not only with test prep, but also with students who are preparing their college application, especially if they are accepted and they go their senior year.
What about language placement tests?
Oh, yes.
Did you guys take one when you got to Spain?
Yes. So you will take a language placement test at the beginning of the year to determine what level of language you will be placed in, as the name suggests. Because we have students coming from many different schools with varying levels of language background, it's really important to have those tests to place you in the appropriate level. So there's going to be a little bit wider range in Spain and France as opposed to China and Italy, because in Spain and France, students need to have at least 2 years of high school level French or high school level Spanish. But there's typically in those places a level for students who have come in at level 2, to those students, especially in Spain, who may be past the AP level. So there's sort of variability in that range. And then we use the results of the language placement test in conjunction with your language teacher's recommendation, because they will, when they submit the recommendation, they will say what they suggest, which level you should be in, and we also take that into account as well.
And I know, for example, in China, the RD Hilda talks about kind of, you know, different levels of each level, and then the kind of very nuanced placement, but that there's some fluidity that
there is. They're not set in stone.
Right.
For example, if a student who is a relative, maybe in Italy or China, they're a novice, they've never studied the language before, and they show incredible proficiency within a very early time frame, it's certainly possible to move up a language level. So they're not set in stone at the beginning of the year. I don't want you to think that. It's just it's definitely a guide for the SYA staff and faculty to know where at the beginning of the year where you belong and how we can best help you achieve proficiency and fluency by year's end. Okay.
One question that I wanted to ask was, did you use, and people ask all this all the time, did you use SYA in your college essays?
Yeah. Yes, I definitely did. I'd probably say a majority of SYA students will use SYA in their college essays because, you know, that is...
You've done something super cool that almost, you know, very few people have done.
Very, very few high school students do anything remotely like this. It is something that's incredibly unique, and it also defines your character while you're in high school. It really gives colleges a sense of who you are, that you would go out of your way to live in a foreign country for an entire academic year, that you're fluent in a language. I mean, it adds a lot of sort of character to your essay in a lot of ways. And it certainly helped me a lot when I was applying to colleges.
We just, again, to talk about our blog, I just published a post from Director of College Counseling at Milton Academy, Rod Skinner, who we sat down with recently, and he talked about that and how he used the descriptor texture.
Texture, yes.
Texture. And I know one of our previous students said that it shows colleges that you're serious about what you pursue.
Right.
So on that note, I'm going to remind you all that if you aren't liking and following us on social, please do. Facebook, SYA Admissions, Twitter, SYA Admissions, Instagram, SYA Abroad. We're on YouTube at SYA Abroad too. We're constantly putting out new videos, new blogs, new posts. We have campus reporters in each of our schools who send us all their photos, and there's a new video from SYA France up there, 100 days in. Can't believe it's been 100 days already. So definitely follow us on each of those social channels and stay up to date with important. We'll have deadline reminders. Also, if you're in the New York City, Los Angeles, or San Francisco areas, we have upcoming receptions, which are great ways to meet the admissions team in person, ask more questions, hear from more alums. So definitely visit our website and RSVP to those events in January. And if you have any other questions, please feel free to reach out, syaadmissions@sya.org, or post questions in the chat box. I'll be monitoring that for a couple of days, and I'll post links on how to get in touch with us there. But we look forward to seeing all of your applications. You have plenty of time over winter break, so work on those essays. Again, check out the tips on how to apply on our YouTube channel. Be in touch, and happy holidays, everybody.
Take care, guys.